Looking around the room, I couldn't help but smile. Jerry deserved this happiness. He'd had a rough couple of years. I was surprised to be here at all. I called him when I got the invitation. Are you sure about this? He even laughed. Yeah, I'm sure. After all, if it wasn't for you, I never would have found Anna. I owe you a debt of gratitude. If you were any other man, I might be dead or in jail by now. You helped me when the most natural thing in the world would have been to turn away. So I went to his wedding. Even sat at the head table, even though I had no part in the ceremony. His new wife hugged me when we met and whispered in my ear. He told me about your story, but I'd like to hear it from you. I've never heard anything like it. I smiled as I watched them. He was 42, she was 46, but they acted like teenagers to each other. I wished them the best. I was dancing with the bride when I saw her. I just stopped moving. Anna looked up in confusion and followed my gaze. I tried to pull free, but she gripped my arm with a death grip. Calm down. Please don't ruin my wedding. I exhaled loudly, trying to gather my thoughts. What the hell is she doing here? Does Jerry know? If he doesn't know, he's probably going to ruin everything. He knows. He really did invite her. He says he did it for you. Now calm down and let's finish this dance. We did. I was already thinking of just leaving, but Jerry was waiting by the table. I looked right into his face. I can't believe you invited your ex-wife to your wedding. What the hell got into your head? He shook his head, smiling slightly. I didn't invite her to the wedding, just the reception. And I invited her for you. Anyway, tonight you're going to sit down and talk to her, at least for a few minutes. I don't want you to do it for me. I want you to do it for you. And for her. Neither of you will ever get over it if you don't. But I gotta tell you, kid, she really loves you. I sat there pondering, tormented. Jerry and Anna took turns staying with me to make sure I didn't leave. I must have pissed them off with my whining, until Anna snapped. Will you please shut the hell up? For a man who went off to war, you're just a wimp when it comes to her. Pull yourself together, talk to her, get it over with. And then leave if you want to. You're letting us all down, and I want my memories of tonight to not include babysitting a whiny little bitch masquerading as a big, strong man. Then I realized she was right. Plus, she had gotten me drunk on 4 very strong drinks, and pretty close together. She chose that exact moment to appear next to me, with tears in her eyes and her hand outstretched. Will you dance with me? Please? I could have been an asshole and yelled at her. I could have sat there and ignored her. I could have gotten up and walked away. I took her hand. We floated out onto the dance floor, her achingly familiar body pressed against mine, and we spun slowly to the song the band was playing. I felt her stagger slightly, and I lowered my gaze to see tears falling onto my jacket. I started to pull away, trying to speak. She brought her hand to my lips. Please don't talk. Just hold me and let me pretend, if only for a moment, that you still love me. And therein lay the crux of my problem. I really did still love her. So we moved slowly across the dance floor, each immersed in our own memories and thoughts. I went through my mind of all the women I thought I loved, including her, and thought about why she had to be the one. The one I wanted. The one I was going to spend the rest of my life with, only to find out she was never mine. That's why it hurt so much. I hugged her and let the memories continue. I saw it coming, I just didn't believe it. He was about 5, 7, or 8 tall and weighed less than 50. And he had to be in his early 40s. I was 31, 6'2", 210, mostly muscle. He rushed toward me, his 2 friends trying to slow him down. I was feeling pretty good. It was Thursday, I had just gotten my paycheck, and my girlfriend was supposed to meet me for drinks and dinner, then order dessert. I got an early start, had a couple beers while I waited and chatted with my friends. I didn't know him, had never seen him before in my life. He positioned himself right in front of me. I was wondering what he wanted when I saw his hand move. It started somewhere around his knees, gaining momentum as it moved. I saw his hand clench into a fist, with it moving so slowly that I could tell he had probably never clenched a fist before. I remember thinking that whatever he hit had better be soft, or he would hurt his hand when it hit my eye. I was so engrossed in watching that it didn't occur to me to defend myself. I fell down and he started trying to kick me. I had been out of the sandbox long enough to let him slip under my protection, but not so long that instinct and training didn't kick in full force. I rolled over and made a leg grab, dropping him to the ground beside me, quickly trapping him in a submissive position. His 2 buddies tried to jump in, but they were outnumbered and armed, so they enlisted the help of the bartender to help pull me off of him. My cousin was the bartender and owner of the place. He saw this cheap shot and just kept polishing the glass he was holding. I regained my normal breathing and pounced on him. What the hell is wrong with you, man? Do you have some kind of death wish? pouncing on strangers half your age and twice your size? I should tie you in a knot and send you home to your wife with bruises and bumps." He continued to struggle. "Let me go, you low-life bastard. You need a lesson in how to entertain married women." I stared at him, wondering if he was high or just delusional. Shoving him off, I jumped to my feet. "Mister, I'm not trespassing on private property. But if you come back to me, I guarantee you pain. Do you understand me?" Apparently, he didn't understand because he got up with a yell and a swing. I threw a punch at him. He dropped like a stone and lay there. I looked at his buddies. "Get him out of here, and I think I can say on behalf of the management that he needs to drink somewhere else. And tell him that jumping on younger, stronger, and meaner strangers is a sure way to not live to a ripe old age." They wanted to object, but the bartender interrupted them. Eventually, they brought it out, and we laughed for a few minutes until my date showed up. She saw my bruise starting to appear and went into mother mode. "What's wrong, dear?" I joked. "Some guy came over and accused me of sleeping with his wife. He hit me before I could react. Sad, really. He was in his early 40s, short in stature, and had no idea how to fight. But he had nerve. If some guy's flirting with his wife, he'd better be on his guard." As I recounted the episode, her face grew paler and paler. I noticed this and tried to reassure her. "Relax, honey. There's nothing wrong with me. But if you feel like kissing him to make things better, I won't mind." She immediately covered my face with light kisses and then pulled away with a smile. "There you go. Mom made everything better? No mean old man can hit my sweetheart. He had to be a pretty big man to attack you. Didn't he notice all those fine muscles?" She cooed, rubbing my bicep. I found out later that she just wanted me to describe him again. He was actually older than me, short in stature, with a small tummy. He didn't have any skills, but he had a lot of chutzpah. If his wife is cheating on him, it could be really bad if he finds this guy. Melody fell silent again, then excused herself to the restroom, saying she wasn't feeling well. My cousin Bob, the bartender, heard most of the conversation. There's always the quiet ones, you know. He was probably living his version of the American dream, happy as a clam, and then he finds out his wife is a whore. Those are the ones to watch out for, the ones who can kill you in a fit of rage. I've seen it to one degree or another 100 times or more. I hope you've harassed him enough for him to leave you alone. I nodded, agreeing completely. I hope he finds the bastard and kicks his ass. I've seen a few people go down while in the service after receiving letters from Dear John. Still, he'd better get his facts straight and be careful. He's not much for fighting. Melody reappeared, looking sad. Sorry, honey, the hospital called. There was a big accident on the highway and they're short-staffed. They've been begging, so I'm going to have to go there. I'll call tomorrow if I'm not too tired. Love you. She kissed me on the cheek and walked out. This had happened before, as she was a trauma nurse at the local hospital. Fortunately for me, she worked 12-hour shifts the first half of the week, so she was available Thursday through Saturday. I, on the other hand, worked out of town, and a lot of it. No, I don't have a high-paying executive job that has me flying around the country, solving problems for mega-corporations or saving the world for the government. I'm laying stone. That's right, Rock. Big rocks, you know? My dad was the guy I was just talking about, jetting around the country and sometimes the world, making his company big money. He was almost never around, so my mom raised my sister and me pretty much alone. And, in my opinion, did it pretty damn well. When I was 12, my dad decided he didn't need a middle-aged, middle-class housewife on his hands and traded her in for a newer model. She was heartbroken, but my grandfather, who never liked him, was furious. My father tried to rush the divorce through, depriving him of his medical funds. Dad intervened, spent some of his own money, found her the second-best divorce attorney in the state only because the first one was too busy, and burned him to the ground. Dad fought until Dad threatened to sue his company for violating the morals clause. His new woman was his assistant at one time. When he saw his meteoric career threatened, he curled up like a cheap tent, and Mom walked out, fragrant as a rose, albeit heartbroken. Dad moved to the other coast, and we hardly saw him again until he came to my high school graduation and offered me admission to one of the best colleges on the West Coast if I agreed to move. I politely declined until he insisted, at which point I cursed loudly and physically kicked him out of our house. I never saw him again from then on. My mom remarried to a decent man who loved her very much. Surprisingly, she ended up pregnant, and at the age of 15, I became a brother. I admired the man, and my sister idolized him. He offered to help pay for college, but didn't insist when I decided not to continue my education. Instead, I became part of the Big Green Machine and spent 4 years in the service, a year each in both sandboxes. By the time I got out, I had a better understanding of how the world worked and was in school on military money while working for my grandfather. You guessed it, he was a master stonemason, and all he did all his life. Even at 62, he had a body that 30-year-old gym rats would kill for. My dad couldn't leave fast enough, but I was old enough to pick up a rock. Dad would stack a bunch in the backyard of his house and reward me depending on how fast I could pick them up. Sometimes I collected them in ways he never intended, but by the time I was 13, they always held up. At 14, I became his apprentice, working summers and after school if he worked close to home. There was no shortage of stones in Afghanistan, especially in the unit I served in, and I relaxed by building walls, especially around our positions. When the wall I built saved several lives, including that of our captain, the guys soon became avid helpers. We always had the best fortified positions around. The Afghans were excellent masons, and I learned their techniques, sometimes working alongside them to build schools and hospitals. I learned everything I could from them. Dad took me into the business as soon as I got out. Soon I was doing the work for him, usually just me and an assistant or two. The big jobs were usually handled by him. One of the worst days of my life came when he passed away, victimized by a texting kid. He was crossing the road and hit Pope head-on. They estimated he was traveling at 65 when they collided. Pope was in his 66-year-old Ford pickup truck, no airbags, no head restraints. His neck was broken and doctors say he probably died instantly. No matter how he died, he was gone at the age of 66. He was going to retire as soon as he finished his current job. He and his grandmother had bought an RV intending to travel the country. Due to his impending retirement, he gradually transferred the company into my name so I wouldn't have to deal with a lot of paperwork. I was 27. Stonemasonry is a fascinating occupation. A master mason can make a lot of money depending on the type of work. My company specialized in building and rebuilding drywalls, walls built without mortar, depending on the size and the way the stones are laid to keep their shape. This skill is not easy to learn, and we were the best in the region. My grandfather, before he died, made a deal with the state university system to repair the walls on the 5 oldest campuses. Some of them were over 300 years old and had fallen into disrepair or collapsed completely. I had a crew of 2 master masons and 3 or 4 journeymen at each site. We paid the journeymen from $15 to $20 an hour, depending on their skill level. As they progressed, their wages increased. Of course, it took years to become a master, but as I said, the pay was excellent. The question arose as to whether I could keep my contract, but I convinced them to believe in me. Look, Pop was practically an administrator before he passed away. The same masons with the same skills are still working. I guarantee the work won't suffer. They ended up keeping us, mostly because the company was in my name by then, and they'd never complained before, and knew it would be hard to replace us. Bricklayers are rare, and really good ones are even rarer. I hated being a manager without being able to lay stone on a regular basis. I solved the problem by hiring my sister Becky. She could actually lay stone pretty well and could spot shoddy work a mile away. She had just graduated with a business degree, and there weren't many good jobs available, so she took the job for the experience, if not more. We still had to hold meetings and check the books, which we planned to do in conjunction with weekly family dinners. My stepfather Jerry was an accountant, and Dad liked him so much that he gave him our business when he married Mom. Grandma was always there, and she and Mom participated in discussions with years of experience to lean on. My younger brother Jerry Jr. was 15, and I had already promised him a job for the next summer. He would start at the bottom, grinding stone like all the apprentices. He had an amazing knack for math, and I was sure he wouldn't become a Freemason. It didn't matter. Accountants were valuable people too. I was 30 years old when I met Melody. One Thursday night, she came to a bar with some friends. We both felt an immediate attraction, almost lust at first sight. Billy, my cousin and the owner of the bar, invited live bands on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday nights. The place was a blue-collar joint, so they played mostly country music, and some of it was even good. I watched Mel dance a few quick numbers and admired her grace. She walked up to the bar just as the band started a slow song and ordered a portion for her table. When the music started, she grabbed my hand. "I don't want to waste a good slow song, and yes, I'd love to dance with you. Thank you for asking." I was so surprised I couldn't even speak and stumblingly followed her while my friends laughed. The slow dance with Mel should have been mandatory for the graduating class to show how it should be. Of course, if that had happened, there would have been a lot of wet spots on a lot of jeans. This woman just pressed herself against you, leaving no space between you, moving with you so gracefully that it felt like you were alone, except for the extremely pleasant warmth and feel of her body. I think I fell in love with her before the first song was even over. She was tall, about 5'9", and when she put on her 5-inch heels, she could look me in the eye. When the dance was over, she wouldn't let go of my hand and pulled me to her table. I met her friends, but I still can't tell you their names. The band stopped 45 minutes before closing time, and we were able to talk without yelling. Her friends were tired of waiting and were urging her to go home. "Damn it, Mel, kiss the guy. You know you want to. Get his number and let's go," one of her friends said, and she did. "You never forget the first kiss of someone you like. Will you be here tomorrow?" she asked, pulling away. I just nodded. "Meet me out front at 7:30. Take me somewhere nice for dinner. Bye." And she was gone, leaving traces of her perfume on my body and the taste of her lips on mine. I got up and wandered back to the bar where hell was waiting for me from the guys. "Not a bad game, Bandit," Billy laughed. "If she held out a hoop, I think you'd jump through it." I got that nickname because my real name was Jesse James. My father chose it, saying he admired his Robin Hood image. One day I found information about him. Many historians recognize him as the first sociopathic criminal in American history. I didn't care why. I didn't care how. I cared that she chose me. But I was incredibly wary. You see, I didn't have the best track record with women. I'd had 2 serious affairs after high school. The first ended when she explicitly told me she wasn't going to wait for me while I was in the service. "I'm 19. You may not come back. I don't want such an uncertain future. I really care about you, and if I'm still single when you come back, maybe we can start over." Well, I hated it, but I understood. We met again when I got home, but we had both changed and the magic was gone. We realized this pretty early on and parted as friends. The second one I met in college. She was the star of the volleyball team. Tall, muscular, attractive, and the most arrogant woman I had ever met. Someone once told her she was special, and she believed it for the rest of her life. The volleyball team won the national championship several times at a school where the basketball and football programs sucked. This made her the queen bee, and both staff and students obediently followed her every whim. Everyone in town knew who Cindy Tolliver was. I wasn't a troll either. 6'1", thanks to military training and work, I was as hard as the rocks I lay on and even had impressive abs. Not that I ever took my shirt off except on the job. Sandy brown hair with hints of red due to being outdoors so much, and blue eyes that were so pale they almost seemed gray. I also had a perpetual tan due to being outdoors so much. The beauty of drywall construction is that it can be done even in cold weather because you don't have to worry about the mortar setting properly. So we worked all year round unless the ground was so deeply frozen that we couldn't lay the stone properly. I did most of my classes in the winter. Cindy was so used to getting her way that it shocked her when someone turned her down. It just so happened that I was the one who said no that day. We were at a popular bar and grill off campus. The food was delicious, the prices were reasonable, and the place was very crowded during happy hour. I sat at a large table by myself. Everyone else was busy with the crowd. They had really good food, and I was halfway through a great cheeseburger when she and her entourage walked in. 2 more women and 4 guys. Looking around, she soon discovered that the only available table belonged to me. She approached me. "My friends and I need a table and you only have 1 free. Would you mind giving it up so we can sit down?" She smiled falsely, assuming I'd be happy to disappear for her pleasure. "Yes," I said with a smile, continuing to eat. She assumed that yes meant I would leave, but yes meant I was okay with it, so I continued eating. After a minute or 2, she snorted. "Are you going to leave or what?" "We're waiting. When I'm done or a smaller table becomes available, I'll gladly give it up. Or, since I have so much room, you can all join me." "You can go stand at the bar," one of the guys said loudly, pouting slightly. I smirked. "Boy, don't you know that standing while you eat will make your legs even bigger? I'm already having a hard enough time finding a decent 14-year-old girl. No need to push it." "Maybe I should make you go," he growled. He looked to be about 5'10" and in pretty good shape, but his posture and attitude said he didn't know how to do anything. I looked at him for a minute, then took a big sip of tea, ate a few fries, and sighed. "Okay, I see 3 possible outcomes. 1, you kick my ass, and people think you're a jerk since you started a fight with someone minding their own business. 2, I'll beat the dog shit out of you in front of your friends, and everyone will think you deserve it for being a first-class asshole. Or 3, you can leave me alone while I finish the last 2 bites and I'll go. Why don't you let your friends sit out while you go order drinks? I'll be gone by then." He pouted. Cindy watched this exchange with amazement. She held up her hand. "Stop it, Brian. I think this could end badly for you if you don't. Do as he said, order us drinks. We'll be right here if this gentleman wants to share." By then I was done. I stood up, pushing back the chair for the girl closest to me. "Please take a table. I'm already done anyway. Have a nice evening. I reached for the column next to the table and pulled out my cane. My leg was in a cast, the result of one overeager student trying to show off in front of me. He ended up dropping a 65-pound rock on my foot, breaking 2 bones. That's why I needed a table. I couldn't stand at the bar. Her eyes widened. Please stay and let us buy you a beer. Thank you for the offer, but I have to decline. I can't drink right now because it might interfere with my medication. Brian came back, saw the cast, and smirked. I realized he thought it would be easy with me. Sure enough, he followed me to the car. You think the cast will save you? It will only make it easier. I'm going to. I'd heard enough, so I turned, wrinkling my nose at the sudden movement, and drove the point of my cane right into the soft tissue above his groin. He dropped like a stone, making a sound like a deflating balloon, and wet himself. I turned back to my truck. Don't get up until I pull out of the parking lot. If you do, I'll assume you intend to hurt me, and you won't like my response. Grow up before you get grabbed by someone not as patient as me. He was still lying there when I went outside. I didn't know it, but Cindy and her friends noticed his absence and came out to rescue me. They managed to witness our little conversation. They picked Brian up, dusted him off, and Cindy pestered everyone in the restaurant for information about me. Cindy took the trouble to find me. She didn't have much luck because I was in mostly night classes and didn't socialize with the university crowd. I was older, much more mature and goal-oriented through service rather than the college experience. She eventually tracked me down by stalking the bar and grill. When I walked in, she stood up, pointing to an empty chair. Great, you're here. I saved a seat for you. She pointed to the only empty chair at the table. I looked around the room. There were other empty seats, and was about to head over to one of them when she put her hand on my shoulder. Please, she said, not using the word often, just for a moment. We owe you an apology. Brian was an idiot, and that's one of the many reasons he doesn't hang around with us anymore. I thought I caught the sincerity in her voice, and I sat down. To my surprise, I discovered that she and her friends were not airheads. One was studying political science and had gotten a good offer from a lobbying group upon graduation. Another was preparing to attend Yale University, and a third was going to work for her father after getting her MBA from Wharton. Cindy was majoring in sports psychology, a degree that would come in handy after her career as a professional volleyball player was over. It was a pleasure to watch them fend off fans as they discussed the profitability of new sports in the context of their future, and occasionally asked for my opinion. If I could, I answered their questions. If I couldn't, I talked about it. I told them I was too busy with my business to watch many sports, especially the new extreme sports. This led to questions about my line of work, especially from a business professional. Wow, you're talking about a niche market. Is that good money? What's your business plan? How much of the market do you control? I raised my hand to stop her. It's great money. I may never be rich, but I'll be very comfortable. My advertising is passed on by word of mouth, and my kind of work isn't affordable for everyone. I work with multi-million-dollar properties most of the time. Right now, I have 2 big projects for real estate developers, plus a restoration contract for the state college system. With the crews I have now, I've been working for almost 2 years. And I'm flying out tomorrow to talk to college systems in 2 states to do the same thing for them that I'm doing here. With the crews I have now, that will add another 2 or 3 years of work. I'll probably interview and hire some local masons to get the project started on time. Even when the economy went south, since I usually work for the rich, I still had a steady job. Everyone sat back surprised. Becca, majoring in business, spoke first. I'm just writing a paper on the viability of niche businesses. I think I'll dig through everything I already have and do a paper just on your business if you'll let me. Please? I thought for a second and grinned. Sure, it'll be more free advertising for the business. Just be warned that most of the work is out in the field, so you may have to travel if you want an in-depth analysis. She grinned. Not a problem. One of the perks of having rich parents is free money, especially if I tell them it's school-related. Cindy frowned at the thought of following me around, but prudently said nothing at that moment. I found out later that she tried to talk her out of it. Becca refused. It's a good opportunity, Cien. The report will look good on my Wharton application. And I don't plan on dating him. She smirked slightly before continuing. What he's planning is another matter entirely. Let's face it. She was a beautiful, determined woman, used to getting her way. I was more calm and non-confrontational, inclined to go along unless it conflicted with my values. The inevitable happened, and we slept together, beginning a fairly intense 2-year relationship. I led her on, realizing early on that the only way to keep things fair was to get her off balance. If she got too comfortable, her my way or else would come out. I explained it to her. You may be the queen at school, but to me you're just another girl. You're beautiful and I'm attracted to you, but I'll never be your doormat. I look at a serious relationship as a partnership with pros and cons. Everyone has strengths and weaknesses. In an ideal relationship, the weaknesses and strengths should balance each other out, and each partner should take the lead from time to time. Do you understand? She smiled at me, half smirking. Oh, I understand. And I intend to be your queen before we're done, just as you will be my king. Those were the words I needed to hear, so for 18 months I climbed the mountain, only to find that there was nothing but sheer rock at the top. I think she would have been willing to sleep with him on the first date if I had pushed her, but I made her wait, which was part of my plan to get her off balance. We escalated to manhandling, but I always stopped, which upset her a lot. Eventually, she got tired of it. One night when I got her to the brink and stopped, she exploded. Damn it, Bandit. Time to man up and do me. What's the matter? Don't you think I'm fit? I can give you some references. Or are you afraid you won't be man enough to please me? Don't worry, baby, I'm ready to train you the way I like. I think she realized she was overreacting, judging by the look on her face. She started to try to apologize, but I interrupted her. Don't worry about it, Sin. I've already had several of your acquaintances describe to me in great detail how skilled you are. I'm not as experienced as you, but I've never had any complaints. It's very kind of you to offer to share your experience with me. Just like in volleyball, the more you practice, the better you play. And we already know how good you are at it. I paused, thinking I might have gone a little overboard with experience. And as kind as your offer is, I think I'll decline. I bid you good night. She begged and pleaded as I left her apartment, and even tried to physically stop me. She was a big girl, strong, but I had been lifting a rock for too many years, and I easily broke her grip. I didn't see her for 2 weeks, despite her calls, texts, and emails. It just so happened that I had a deadline and had to work weekends anyway. Her last 2 emails were pretty nasty. She wasn't used to rejection and didn't handle it well. Back in town, I ran into Becca, a business student, and Carol, her law school friend, at a bar and grill. I was sitting alone when they came over to my table. Carol grinned widely. So is it true that Cindy dumped you? Becca saw my face tense up and giggled. Look at the look on his face, Carol. I bet if the truth be told, he dumped her. Didn't he, Jess? I adopted an indifferent expression on my face. I'd say it was a mutual breakup. Let's just say our ideas about relationships were too divergent. Ha, she said. I'd guess it was more like her telling you to jump and you explaining that you didn't like hoops. Whatever it was, it shook her up a lot. She's been a screaming bitch ever since you disappeared. Coach threatened to bench her if she didn't pull her head out of her ass. Oh well, speak of the devil. Just then, Cindy walked in with a basketball in her arms. She looked at us sitting together and snapped. Leaving the basketball player in the dust, she stormed over to us. He walked behind her, trying to take her hand. For the second time, she growled at him. Let go of me. What part of we're just friends don't you understand? The look on his face told me that wasn't exactly what she meant. What the hell, Sin? Why are you so hung up on that redneck? He was already stupid enough to dump your ass one day. He's a loser. I bet he'll never be able to support you in the style you deserve like I do. Becca nearly fell off her chair with laughter. What was it Bugs Bunny used to say? Oh yeah, what an asshole. You're not even out of high school yet, and your chances of getting into the pros are slim at best. Depending on your specialty, it could be years before you make decent money. Jesse now owns his own successful business and has for many years. He makes well over 6 figures, and that number is growing every year. Not bad for a redneck, eh, Dustin? He was about to object angrily when Carol interjected into the conversation. Dustin, whatever you're thinking, stop. Look at him. He didn't gain those muscles at the gym. Besides, he's been in combat twice, so he knows how to wound and kill people. He probably wouldn't have any trouble taking you apart and putting you back together a foot shorter. Maybe you want to sit at the bar while he and CIN talk? Come on, Becca and I will keep you company. They walked him out, complaining. Sin sat down and just stared at me for about 3 minutes before he spoke. The worst thing about people spoiling you is that it works. I know I'm arrogant and a total control freak. I know I can't stand being told no. But Jess, I'm a good person. I'm in college, hell, you know I can learn. Why don't we start over? I sat there pondering. She was the kind of person who didn't know how to appreciate silence, so she started again. I regret that night. I was brainwashed into thinking I was a great gift and should be appreciated. I know I'm just a girl. A beautiful girl, but there are plenty of prettier, better built, smarter, and more understanding girls around. Becca and Carol, for example. They've made no secret that if we really went through with it, they're interested. But they'll never love you the way I do, Jess. They'll never melt the way I melt when you touch them. If you want to wait, I'll wait. You set the pace. I'll follow your lead. 4 months later, she wanted to see where we were going. They didn't win nationals that year. She blamed it on me, saying I was distracting her with extra training and keeping her energy level low. She was due to graduate and had a very attractive offer to join a seasoned pro in beach volleyball. The pay was pretty good, but as she explained, the money was more in advertising, personal appearances, and television. She wanted to work for 3 years to save enough money to continue her studies to a PhD. After several long conversations, we decided the smartest thing to do was to get married. She swooned when I popped the question and gave her a ring. We decided to hold off on getting married until after her first year of employment. I hoped she would be fed up by then and leave to focus on her studies. I could afford to pay for her. She was from a single-parent family and her father couldn't afford to help her. We spent a glorious month together. She traveled with me from job to job, getting to know the cities we visited while I worked, and then focused on keeping me exhausted and weak every night. For the first time in my life, I struggled to lift large rocks. My crew would chuckle and tell me that if I didn't exercise after work, I would regain my strength. That's why I pay you assholes to lift weights. There's no way I'm giving up my exercise program. Now get those rocks over here. When she left, I felt really screwed up. She clung to me and cried like a baby. I had to almost pull her away from me so she could get on the plane. It was really hard because I didn't want her to leave. If you don't like it, honey, come home. You know I have money for your tuition, so you don't have to worry. She sighed and hugged me tighter. All my life, people have taken care of me. My father, then school. Now you. For once, I need to prove that I can take care of myself on my own. Besides, I signed a contract. I must perform this season. I didn't like it, but I understood. The first year was hard for both of us. She performed very well. She and her partner took the top spot in the standings. As they won more and more, their money grew. I watched it on TV and I didn't like the thong they wore at all. It's spelled out in the contract, honey. The manufacturer offered us an ad campaign because of our popularity. It's a good number, honey. You don't mind, do you? How could I not support her? It was taking up our time, but we were getting by. It got to the point where we were only together once a month for 3 days. I was counting the days until the end of the season. She came home and we tried to catch up. Mom hinted at grandchildren. It seemed my sister and I had something in common. We both liked girls. That explained why she hung out with us so often. She wanted to hook up with any of Cindy's friends. She had a couple teammates. Beck managed to hook up with one once, but they broke up because neither of them wanted to get into a relationship. Eventually, she found a nice, quiet girl and they got married. In addition to nagging me, after my mom came to terms with Becky's choice, she started hinting to her that they should either adopt a child or do artificial insemination. They were considering it. After 4 glorious weeks, she became sullen. I put up with as much as I could before confronting her. What's going on, Cian? Don't try to brush me off. We're going to sit here until you tell me. She was quiet for a bit before telling me. I signed a contract for another season. They doubled our money and the exhibit is worth a lot more. I'm sorry, honey, but I have to do this for me. Please don't be mad. I wasn't angry, I was furious. We bickered most of the time until she left. Why can't you be more gracious? Just this year. I swear to you. I've been supportive. All last year. You made promises then, remember? So much for your word when it comes to money. Wrong word. She broke out into a scream. I was only half listening to her, and after about 10 minutes, she realized I wasn't hanging on to every word. She stopped immediately. In a quiet voice, she tried again. I guess I deserve it. Tell you what, I'll write a contract. If I don't stop next year, the marriage is off. Please, Bandit, it really means a lot to me. I just looked at her. You don't need a contract. If you don't stop next year, I'm out. Do you understand? She went a little pale and made a bunch of promises. Promises she didn't keep. At the beginning of the next year, things got even better for them. Her partner Jen called and thanked me for letting her play. This is my last year on tour, so if she doesn't find a new partner, she'll be done too. I plan to teach. I've already found work as a high school math teacher and volleyball coach in a small town in California. I've always been a fan of beach vacations. Maybe I'd find a nice quiet guy and remarry. But if we had an arrangement like yours, maybe I'd still be married. I didn't know she was divorced. I knew she was married and that he didn't like her absence. When Cindy told me this, I threw her a reproachful look. She took the hint and fell silent. What agreement, Jen? The way I said it made her pause. You know, about your understanding. I let the silence linger and she got nervous. I'm sorry, I didn't make myself clear. I didn't mean understanding, I meant your understanding. She's very lucky to have you. I have to go now. Watch us on TV. The whole conversation made me feel a little uncomfortable. The first time she was home, I asked her about it. Don't worry about it, honey. She's gotten a little scatterbrained since the divorce. I think it hurt her more than she wants to admit. Believe me, I won't make the same mistake she did. I love you too much. When I asked her what those mistakes were, she was a little miffed. I pressed on, and she finally admitted that she had an affair with one of the men on the tour, and her husband found out. You have my word, honey, I will never hurt you like that. I have too much to lose. She usually called every Monday and Tuesday, but I never heard from her, even though I called and left 6 emails. The next week, I answered her the same way, not picking up the phone once out of the 10 times she called. The next week, she came home unscheduled, furious. After she ranted about me not answering, I told her I was just following her lead. We were both furious, but it ended with me telling her to shove her Spanish boyfriend wherever she wanted. She turned so pale I thought she was going to pass out. By then, I had already exhausted my limit of communication with her, so I got up and left. 2 days later, she tracked me down at the construction site and begged me on her knees to let her talk. CN kept telling me for 2 days that there was nothing there, and if I was that unhappy, she would never advertise again. She swore on everything she could think of that she would leave for good when the season was over. In hindsight, you could say she was reading from a script, but they were the right words at the right time, and I believed her. She did 2 more shoots, both times with a golfer. It started when I needed tires for my truck, so I went to a dealer in the town I was working in. It took over an hour, and I headed across the street for lunch. After lunch, I had to wait another 10 minutes for them to finish, and I looked at the magazines, casually flipping through them. My interest was piqued by a golf magazine from 2 weeks ago. There was a profile of Juan Pablo showing him on and off the course. In the picture that caught my eye, he was sitting in the bleachers watching a beach volleyball game and then kissing one of the winning players. The article quoted him as saying that he went to every competition his schedule allowed to support his girlfriend. You guessed it, the player was Cindy. I was beyond furious. I would purposely miss her calls and fly to her next match. She and John always shared a room, and I got there around 7. John opened the door and turned pale when she saw me. Cindy wasn't there. I called her in John's presence. She was glad to hear from me. Hi, darling. Where have you been? I was beginning to worry that you had replaced me. I could never replace you, honey. Did I catch you at dinner? I heard a noise in the background. Yes. Jan and I are in the hotel dining room. The food is really good. I managed to chat with her for a few minutes while John grew increasingly pale. I hung up the phone and smiled at Jen. Jen, did I ever tell you I was in the military? I spent 2 years in the desert killing people as often as I could. I won't kill you, John, but if I don't get the truth out of you now, I'll break your wrists and knees. You'll live, but you'll never walk properly or use your hands like you used to. No one wants a crippled volleyball player or coach. I'll definitely go to jail, but not before I get to Cindy and her Latin lover. It's your choice, but if you take the easy way out, now's the time to start. Would I have done it? No, but at that moment I was very angry. John must have thought I was being serious, judging by the startled expression on her face. She was talking so fast I had to make her slow down. It started at the end of the first season. Not with him, but with another volleyball player. No love, she said, just relieved tension. She admitted she used to do the same thing until her husband caught her. She pleaded, but the deed was done and he divorced her. Cindy hit it off with Juan at her first photo shoot, but apparently rubbing skin against each other was too much. She told me you were okay with it, Jess. Said you were doing the same thing. Said you guys had come to an agreement. She was free to satisfy her desires and you were doing the same while you were traveling for work. She also told me that it would be over when the season was over and kept talking about how happy she would be when you got married. She hung her head, saying she now knew there was no agreement. Where is she now? Her eyes grew huge. Please, Jess, let me call her and get her back here so you can talk. I'm sure you can work things out. Tell me right now or you'll have at least a broken elbow added to your injuries. I stood up, and she recoiled back in horror. They're at his hotel across town. He's playing in a tournament here. She gave me the room number, telling me they might not be there. They might be at the dance. I grabbed her by the throat and pushed her against the wall, pressing my face against hers. If you warn her, I'll come back and get more angry. Do we understand each other? She peed her pants at the end and nodded so fast I was afraid she'd hurt herself. I stood in the lobby and watched them enter the room hand in hand and head for the elevators. I had the room number and I could have waited, but I knew what they were doing, so I didn't see the point in waiting for them to undress. I gave them 3 minutes and kicked the door open. She looked back, recognized me, and almost fainted. He was so drunk he was trying to play macho. I quickly stopped him by twirling him around and locking his arm. Hold still, bastard. You resist, it's going to be bad. You understand me? Good. Now tell me how long you've been having fun, and if you lie, I'll know. 3, maybe 4 months. That doesn't mean anything, man. Calm down. So you partied that long knowing she was engaged and you thought it was okay? I read that you got engaged and she's expecting you in Spain. I wonder if she'll think it's nonsense. Let's call her and find out. By this time, he was begging. Cindy put the bed between us and eased the dress back into place. She still didn't say a word. I realized I was running out of time. There were people in the hallway and I was not known for being calm. I let go of her and he stood up. I hit him. Try swinging that club now, you bastard. He collapsed to the floor and I looked at Cindy. Keep the ring. It doesn't matter to me anymore. Come back when you get up the courage and I'll pack your things. Don't try to talk. We have nothing to say to each other, no more. I walked out the door, took the elevator downstairs and called for the manager. I apologized, said I was always clumsy and fell through the door of room 418, explained that my girlfriend and I were going to visit and he was standing outside the door and could get hurt. I gave him my credit card number, saying I'd be happy to pay for the repairs and any medical bills. He wanted me to stay, but I told him I really needed to catch a plane and he could call if he needed me. He could just ask for my number from a friend. I found out the next day when I watched a small portion of the tournament he was playing in. The announcers made a big deal out of it, saying he might make it through the rest of the season, explaining that it was just an accident among friends. The rumor mill in both sports kicked into gear immediately, and he used his injury as an excuse to fly home. The following season, announcers discussed his new single status. I didn't say a word to anyone, but many other golfers and announcers were staying at the same hotel, and it was impossible to keep quiet. Jan and Cindy played the next 3 games poorly, each time losing in a row. At the end of the season, Jan actually retired and Cindy signed with a new partner fresh out of college. She played 4 more seasons before quitting and getting her PhD. For about 3 months, she tried to get me to talk to her, telling my mom that she was flying in and we would talk even if she had to force me. My mom laughed and told her off. But she never flew over. That was it. Not very original. The same thing probably happened 100,000 times every day all over the world. But it was my world that was shattered. For 2 years, I had a deep distrust when dealing with a woman. Then I met Melody, and light came back into my life. As I mentioned, she worked as a trauma nurse at a local hospital. 12-hour shifts on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, and on-call every other week. I thought it was fate because all she did was work, and I was usually out of town for at least 4 days, so our free time usually overlapped. We got off to a slow start, a few dinners out, dancing at better clubs than the bar we met at. We watched a few girl movies, went to a museum, a baseball game. She was up for anything. But then again, it was only a matter of time before she looked into those big, beautiful eyes, and I would fall all over myself trying to please her. We never saw each other on the days she worked, although she always called me when she had a break. She lived with 2 other nurses, and they said they agreed never to bring their boyfriends home. One of us is always working and the other is usually sleeping, so we keep you out so you don't get distracted. Plus, last year, before we made the rules, one stole a boyfriend while the other was sleeping. I had to replace them both. So no boyfriends, baby. Rules are rules. We were together almost from the time I got home from work until she needed to go home to get ready for work. I got tired of renting motel rooms, so I advertised. I had a lot of contacts in my business, so when I asked people to look out for a house with at least 3 bedrooms and a large lot, I got a good dose of ridicule. Finally, someone got you, didn't they? Good for you. It was a pretty common theme. I would just smile and show them the picture. Then the comments would boil down to the phrase, lucky bastard. One interior designer judged me. Idiot. Don't you know that 99% of the time it's the woman who chooses the house? Maybe you should keep her in the loop. I took her advice and, armed with inside information about houses in disrepair or homeowners looking to get rid of one due to the economy or divorce, went looking. Under the pretense that I wanted to spend as much time with her as possible and needed a woman's perspective, I took her along. She wasn't impressed with the first 5 houses, but on the second weekend, we walked into a 4-bedroom house on 3 acres on the outskirts of town. She walked around the house, touched the appliances. She really liked the large kitchen. She liked the layout where the master bedroom was on one side of the house, away from the rest of the house, allowing for privacy. We walked around all 3 acres, found a small spring, and she touched some large trees. What are you thinking about? Mel looked at me with misty eyes. About tree houses. The next week, I took the next week off and started the paperwork. I got a really favorable offer. They had just started the foreclosure process and were happy to avoid the process. The owner had abandoned the house that week, leaving for parts unknown. On Friday, we were back at the house again. We took another look at it. I asked her if she could be happy living here. I'm sure I'd love it. Why the question? Because we bought it on Monday. I need you to pick out some new furniture. Is that okay with you? Before she could answer, I dropped to my knee. I hope you like this house. I intend to live in it for a long time. A long time with you by my side. I'd like to have to use 1 or 2 bedrooms someday. All you have to do is say yes. I held out a ring. A traditional, simple ring with a stone on top. She surprised me by fainting on the kitchen counter. Melody recovered quickly. There were tears in her eyes. I didn't get the response I was expecting. I love you, Jesse, but I can't marry you right now. I'm begging you to give me time. I have some things to do before I accept your proposal. Please, and I'm begging you for this, give me 6 months and ask again. I promise the wait will be worth it if you agree. That wasn't the answer I was expecting, and I was terribly disappointed. She tried her best to reassure me, to the point of taking me shopping for furniture the next day. She had no preference just as long as it was sturdy. We bought a bedroom with a California king bed, a sectional sofa, an armchair, and a rocking chair for the living room. I looked at her as she sat in the rocking chair. She grinned. This might come in handy in a year or 2. That simple statement filled me with hope. I gave her a credit card and told her to buy whatever she saw fit. I took Melody to meet the family. Mom and Becky liked her right away. Grandma wasn't as thrilled. My little brother practically drooled over her, and my stepfather just smirked. I took that as a good sign. I arrived the following Friday and went straight to the new house. She had put in a nice dining room and set up a guest room. Her car was parked outside, but I didn't see her. I found her splendidly naked on the California king bed. She slid down the bed and reached for me. I was going to start without you. I want to christen every piece of furniture, every foot of space in our new home. Next weekend we'll do the yard. I tried, really tried, but all we accomplished that weekend was a bedroom and a dining room table. She laughed, saying she would take pity on me, and we would tackle the guest room and living room the following week. The next weekend I was sitting at the bar waiting for her, happier than I'd ever been in my life, when a guy walked in and punched me. When she was gone, I had a few more drinks with friends and headed to my new home early in the morning to wait for the love of my life. 2 gunshots rang out as I walked to my car. They hit the car in 2 places. Still, they were close enough to scare me to death. Instinct kicked in and I fell and rolled behind the SUV. I heard a guy approaching, crying and cursing, peering between the cars. I rolled under the SUV, jumped out, and crouching, ran to the next line of cars. Get out, bastard! I'll make sure you never screw up another husband. His voice shook with rage, and I realized he was pretty drunk, judging by the slurred speech. I got a good look at him as he passed under a streetlight in the parking lot. This was the same guy who hit me, and I realized it wasn't an accident. He was after me. My stepfather used to say, "Never leave a live snake behind you," so I lurked and waited. He was almost level with my hiding place and looking the other way, so I carefully threw my shoe behind him, which slipped off my foot. The slight noise made him flinch, and as soon as he turned his back, I was at his side. I grabbed his hand, which had the gun in it, and yanked him back hard. The pressure made him release the gun, and after that I beat the shit out of him. Realizing that if I didn't stop I was going to destroy him, I let go of him and stood up. He was cold, so I picked him up, threw him in the back of the truck and drove off, eventually ending up in front of an abandoned barn in the middle of nowhere. He was starting to come around when I lowered the back door and pulled him out by his feet, listening to his head hit the gravel as he fell. It knocked him out again. He came to his senses when I splashed some water in his face that was in the cooler in the back of the truck. He turned his head, eyes widening in horror as he realized he was motionless. I didn't intend to destroy him, but I wanted to scare him to death. A .32? Really, you can only piss people off with a weapon like that. I know it helped me. Now I'm going to talk and you're going to listen and nod your head. When I'm done, you can talk, and it better be good, because right now I have the urge to shove that bullet up your ass all the way. Now would be a good time to talk. I have to hand it to him. Helpless, but he was still looking at me. What do you want me to say? I'm okay with you entertaining my wife? That's never going to happen. And sooner or later you'll stop looking and I'll get justice. Better destroy me now. I looked down at him. He should have been terrified, but he wasn't backing down. I even admired him. I grabbed him, put him in the back seat and held him by the front of his shirt, slapping him methodically. I'm not entertaining anyone's wife. What can I do to get you to leave me alone? The humor in this situation disappeared very quickly. Back pocket, he sighed. Take out my wallet. Tell me that's not Melody in the picture? If it isn't, I'll apologize, and you can do whatever you want to me. I can't describe how I felt when he said her name. Denial raged in my head as I pulled out my wallet, already knowing what I'd find there. It was her, younger, slightly thinner, smiling for the camera as she posed in her wedding dress with her husband. Sighing, I took a seat next to him. He looked pleased. Is that her, you bastard? Never mind, I can see in your face that it's her. You really didn't know, did you? How does it feel? I hope it sucks as much for you as it does for me. We talked, and after 15 minutes I let him go, pulled out the bottle of straight rye whiskey I'd bought earlier for the bar in my new house, and we proceeded to get drunk. I woke up as the sun hit my face, and as I pulled myself up, I saw that he was holding a .32 caliber pistol and looking at me. Fear coursed through me as he grinned. He put the gun in the toolbox. You're right. It's not a very good weapon. But I wouldn't want to be shot with one of those. And we talked again in the back of the truck. I apologized again and was surprised when he brushed me off. I always knew this would happen. Sooner or later, the age difference and the fact that we liked the same things had to play a part. And then there's the fact that I'm away every weekend. She had plenty of time to play. Well, that explained her free time. He worked as a trucker, specializing in dangerous goods best hauled on weekends and at night to avoid traffic jams. It paid well, but he wasn't home Thursday through Sunday night. What are you going to do? He looked at me in surprise. Divorce her, of course. She's yours now if you still want her. I drunkenly admitted my marriage proposal to him. I shrugged. How could I ever trust her? This is the second time something like this has happened to me. No, it's over between us. It hurts, but I know from experience that it can be gotten over. I drove him back to his car, reminding him to get his gun when he got out. Keep it. I don't think I needed to remind me that it could have gotten me killed. When he got in the car, I asked him again what he was going to do. You're in luck. You can just walk away. And I'm going to have to get a divorce. I'll try to keep it simple. No guilt. You go your own way and leave me alone. No kids, so there shouldn't be a problem. If that happens, contact her. Tell her you're going to charge her with adultery and I'll act as a witness. It might make the case easier. He looked up in surprise and slowly held out his hand. I leaned out the truck window and shook it. Sorry, man, he said, started the truck and drove off. I watched his taillights disappear. Me too, I said to the empty space, then drove in the opposite direction. I walked up to my grandmother's house, got in the van, and drove off. I wasn't hiding from anyone, but I knew I needed to wait a little while before I talked to her. Hitting a woman was out of character for me, but I didn't mind the verbal reprisal. I pulled to a stop and sent her an email. Melody, I'm not running away, but you really don't want to be around me right now. Don't look for me. I'm out of town and won't be until next weekend. I'm going to spend that time thinking about our relationship. You remember them, don't you? The one that was based on lies? Call me next weekend, and if I can contain my anger, I'll try to listen to everything you have to say. But don't expect me to believe much. She immediately sent me a short reply. Thank you for at least agreeing to let me talk. There's a lot you didn't know about me, and there's a lot I'd like to tell you. Unless you say otherwise, I'll be at your house next Saturday at 4 o'clock. And Jess, believe it or not, I love you. I thought and pondered all week. My guys had some understanding of what was going on, so they forgave me for acting like an egregious asshole the first few days. As Saturday approached, my sense of dread grew. At least she wasn't dressing up and trying to lure me into bed. I didn't let her walk into the kitchen, forcing her to sit across from me at the kitchen table she'd spent 2 weeks trying to pick out to be perfect. She started to speak, but I held up my hand. Ground rules. Don't tell me how much you love me. Don't waste our time with a bunch of apologies. Just explain to me. Why did you go to bars and date guys while you were married? Do you really think I can go on living my life wondering where you are while I'm working? You could get out of bed with someone else and, after showering and freshening up, meet me at home, dragging me into bed for a shot of sloppy seconds. Would you be able to live like that if it was something you were interested in? Tears came to her eyes and she sobbed quietly for several minutes before she pulled herself together. The look on her face was complete. I've already lost you, haven't I? I didn't answer her. Then she squared her shoulders, looked me in the eye, and began. I guess it doesn't matter anymore, but I'll tell you anyway. I grew up in poverty, and the expression trailer park trash fits my childhood just right. My mom left before I was old enough to remember myself, so I was raised by my dad and 2 older sisters. I was a baby born when both of my parents were in their 30s. My sisters were in their teens when I came into the world. Dad was a complete alcoholic and never once in his entire life told me he loved me. She sighed, remembering. He eventually died of liver disease when I turned 18. My sisters already had families of their own then, one married for the second time, the other for the third. So, as you can see, I didn't have what you might call good role models in my life. Then I met Jerry. I didn't love him, but I respected him, and I knew he would take care of me. I just knew that eventually it would grow into love. We were doing well until he got that job. I was bored and lonely. He talked me into going into the nursing program at the community college, just to have something to focus on. I don't think he expected me to graduate and continue my studies until I became a registered nurse. But for the first time in my life, I had a purpose and a valuable skill. Working in the ER brought in the most money, so I took the job. It was stressful, demanding, and left me no time to think about how my life was turning out. Jerry was making good money, and I was putting most of my paycheck in the bank, intending to make a down payment on a house out of it. Everything was fine until they changed my work schedule. Now that he was home, I was gone. I had friends who were urging me to stop staying home and go out with them for a drink or maybe a dance. I still wore my rings and no one touched me, but it got rid of the boredom. I know it doesn't matter now, but before I met you, I was planning on leaving Jerry. And then I fell in love and fell in love and fell in love and had to have you. The first time you kissed me, I realized it was over between me and Jerry. I still respected him, but I was never going to love him. So I hired a lawyer and started the paperwork. I took my time even though I wanted to get to know you better. There was no desire on my part to start a relationship with someone until I was sure. I don't expect you to believe me, but I've never slept with anyone before you. You're only the second man I've ever been with, and that's the truth. She pulled out some papers. Look at the date. They should have been filed months ago. I just didn't know how to tell him, and the guilt was eating me alive. That's why I wanted to wait, honey. I may not be the best person since I slept with you and loved you while I was still married, but there's no way I would have taken your ring until I was a free woman. And I was going to tell you, and very soon. But I was going to wait until I moved out, and frankly, I was going to lie a little about the timing. She talked herself out of waiting. You know, I believe most of what you're telling me, Mel, but there are still some sore spots. For one thing, when you realized your feelings, you should have broken up right away. Instead, in my opinion, you stayed with Jerry as a backup plan in case I wasn't what you needed. And you still slept with him even when you were sleeping with me. How do you explain that to yourself? Or me? But the most important thing to me is that even if we end up together, I still have to travel for work. What happens when you get lonely? Will you go out with your friends and maybe find yourself in the same situation again? Will I be like Jerry, hiding in parking lots to kill your new lover? As I spoke, her tears grew larger. I let the air out of my lungs, trying to focus. It all comes down to trust, Mel. If I marry, it will only be to a woman I trust with my heart and soul, who will always, always have our best interests at heart. And that's not who you are right now. Frankly, I doubt you ever will be. But I'm offering you a deal. Get your divorce. Let some time pass, and then call me if you're still interested. Maybe we can start over. We'll see. That was it. The final act? It took her 10 minutes to get herself under control again. She wanted a kiss, but I refused. I put my arms around her, and she pressed in so tightly I thought I'd have bruises later. She pulled away, snorting. I understand, Jess, I really do. And even though you don't care about my promises right now, I'll give you one. No matter if we get back together, you will never, ever find a woman who will love you more than I do. And one day, maybe many years from now, even if we aren't together, I'll find a way to prove it to you. She turned and walked away without another word. We only spoke twice after that. I was too angry and she was too whiny to have a reasonable conversation, but she was determined to try. Eventually, she gave up direct communication and started emailing me once a week or so. She tried to keep upbeat and talkative, but for at least 3 months, all the emails ended with her pleading for me to give her another chance. I answered her occasionally if she broached some nervous subject. She wrote to me about going to therapy and how it was helping her a lot. She even got Jerry to go with her twice, and her only comment was that it was educational. She started writing less often, maybe twice a month, and finally, after 7 months, she stopped. I still have her last letter, and there's no way I can bring myself to delete it. My dear Jess, I know it annoys you when I use weasel words, but this will be my last contact with you, so I will say what I feel, even if you don't like it. I got my papers today. I'm officially a single woman again. The second best event in my life, I will always consider meeting you as the first, was going to therapy. I found out who I really am. I shouldn't have married Jerry, but I was selfish and looking for a way out of my miserable life. I was too young, too immature, too stubborn to enter into an adult relationship. Oh, I did everything I wanted to do, but my heart was never truly engaged. Even without you, my marriage would have died sooner or later. I think inertia and fear kept me with him. The time I spent with Dr. Chu taught me to put away my crutches and stand on my own 2 feet for the first time in my life. Jerry was shocked when I told him I didn't want any of our joint assets and sent him a check reimbursing him for my education. I owed him a lot and more. We didn't exactly part as friends, but I don't think he hates me that much now. It's kind of funny if you think about it. Remember those lies I told you about living with 2 other nurses and the no boyfriends rule? I'm living exactly that now, sharing a 2-bedroom apartment with 2 other nurses. I'm fine with that, even though I'm independent now, but I don't think I could go home to an empty apartment. In honor of my divorce, I'm going to give you a gift. I'm going to let you go. Dr. Chu helped me realize that if I were you, I'd have a hard time trusting you. So I'm letting you go. I hope you have a good life and find a woman who will love you as much as I did and as much as I still do. Mel. I stared at the screen for a long time, my finger hovering over the delete button. I didn't want to read it again. It was too painful. Instead, I saved it. This was how I wandered aimlessly through life. If it wasn't for work, I probably would have lost it altogether. It was almost 10 months before I went on a date. It was a beautiful woman, the sister of a contractor with whom I had a lot of business. She was witty, articulate, and seemed to enjoy rubbing her whole body against me as we danced. I really enjoyed the evening, but at the end we both realized there was no spark between us. We went out 2 more times before she found someone else and we broke up. During this time I saw Mel twice. Once, sitting at a stoplight, I saw her through the window of a small bistro. She was with a group of women, smiling and chatting. I sat there so long that the guy sitting behind me had to honk his horn to get me to move. Mel turned around at the noise and looked me straight in the eye when I pulled away. The next time was at the club. I was on my second date with Tina, and we had just sat down at a table when I noticed her sitting at the other end of the room with 4 of her friends. She must have felt eyes on her because she looked up and saw me. Time stopped while we looked at each other. It was actually about 30 seconds before she burst into tears and ran out of the club. Her friends ran after her, all but one who stopped at my table. Asshole! Did it feel good for you to rub another woman? What's wrong with you? I was actually quite calm. Hello to you too, Gwen. I don't mean to belittle your point of view, but I'm not rubbing it in anyone's face. It's been almost a year since Mal and I have been together. It's a pretty small town. We were bound to run into each other eventually. Tell her I'm sorry if I upset her, but it's time for her to move on. Good night, Gwen. I turned back to Tina, ignoring her. She stood there frowning for a few minutes and then walked away, muttering asshole under her breath. Tina naturally wanted to know the whole story, so I told her. She looked at me and sighed. You can tell yourself it's over, but I saw the look on your face when you saw her. Even now when we talk, you're watching the door like a hawk, waiting to see if she'll come back. And she still loves you. Why else would an ex make her cry after almost a year apart? You guys need to clear the air. I paid no attention to her comment. We went out one more time until she met someone she was interested in. Jerry started going to my cousin's bar. It gave us both the same opportunity. It was the one place Mel never went to again. He really was a good guy. When he and I became friends, the guys started making fun of him for trying to kill me. I told them to back off. He had the truth on his side. If he hadn't been so drunk, he would have been much more accurate and I would have been just a memory. One evening, after a few beers, he suddenly asked me a question. Do you miss her? I knew who he was talking about. It was no use trying to mess with his head. Every day? He sighed. Me too, but not every day. Just every now and then when I see mutual friends or pass by a place we used to like to visit. I've been involved with her for years. You know, the other day I saw one of her nurse friends, one of the few I liked, and we talked for a few minutes. She said they call Melody none because she doesn't want to date. She blamed it on you, not me. Said that you have spoiled her so badly that she can't bear the thought of intimacy with another man. She also told me that she was going to therapy, which I'm sure you already know. One of her assignments was to write a letter of apology to everyone she had offended. In her letter, she called it cleansing her demons. Do you have anything like that? I admitted that I did, but didn't elaborate. Well, I kind of remember the good times too. And then at the end, she stood up, pleaded guilty. Hell, she even gave me back the money I spent on her nursing degree. I hope she finds someone else, someone who treats her well. I hummed. Jerry had gotten lucky. The day his divorce became final, one of the dispatchers at his job asked him out. She was a few years older, a military widow with a 14-year-old boy and a 12-year-old girl. They were made for each other, shared the same views, the same beliefs, and he was great with her kids. He was even an assistant coach on the girls' softball team. He went so far as to talk me and my cousin into sponsoring them. We took half the bar, went to a few games, and cheered her on by name, much to her embarrassment. But the hug she gave him was genuine, and he looked so proud you could burst. We were already planning his bachelor party. I was happy for him and sad, watching the little girls play and wondering if I would ever be able to be in the stands cheering on my kid. My chances were getting slimmer and slimmer. I was 32. My clock was ticking. So I laid more stone by throwing myself into the business and growing it. However, there comes a point when you can saturate your market. I was taking on more work than we could handle, even after new masons were added. My grandmother and sister used to get on me for it. Let someone else have the contract, Jess. Get to work with what we have. If you don't, our quality will drop, and that's the kiss of death in this field. Think about the Pope. Do you want his life's work to disappear? It made sense. I stopped taking on new work and even handed off a few small projects to competitors I was confident they would do well. I got my business back on an even keel, but a setback hit me in my personal life. I ran into Becca while still in college when she asked me to come in and offer me a job. She emailed me using her married name, so I was surprised when I saw her. She was a little fatter, but still attractive. In addition to being very successful in her career, by her own admission, she had a successful marriage. He was a hotshot with 7 zeros according to Becky. She held his hand while telling him about it, and it didn't embarrass him in the least. He was probably about 10 years older, and they had just had their first child. Everything they wanted was pretty elaborate, including a small stone cottage designed for play. She wanted it to be built like the Scottish shepherd's cottage she had seen when they were on their honeymoon. We talked, and I agreed to take the contract if I could do it on my own schedule. I took 2 journeymen and 1 foreman and set about erecting the boundary and personal walls. I did all the preliminary work, laid the lines, selected the stones. She wanted local field stone, which was difficult as there were no local suppliers. I was lucky. I bought some existing walls on the estate and carefully marked each stone so that I could assemble them later on the new site. There was also a stone chimney on the property, the last remnant of the original house. I walked over and looked at it and saw an example of the finest masonry. Every stone, right down to the flagstone hearth, was perfectly matched in shape. It impressed me so much that I asked Becca to come and inspect it, explaining my idea. She immediately agreed. I built her a stone patio with a fireplace in the center, with half walls tapering upward so the heat would reflect onto the seating area. It was the perfect spot for cool fall evenings. Years later, she sent me a picture of her 3 children and their friends sitting in front of the fireplace roasting marshmallows with snow falling around them. An unexpected bonus came when I took it apart and discovered a stash under the largest hearthstone. This was a fairly common practice at the time, the only logical way to store valuables. Fire was much more dangerous in those days. There lay a wooden cigar box containing a half-full bottle of whiskey, preserved because it was stored cork down, 2 love letters from the 1870s, and a wedding ring. A small pouch held 2 silver dollars and other change. The letters were from his lover, who he had bought the ring for, but who had died in a fire before they were married. Technically, the ring belonged to me, since I had bought it, but I gave it to the heirs, who fought over it for a while, and then gave it to the local historical society. They wrote about it in the papers, and there was a wave of excavated hearths all over the area. If anyone found anything, they kept quiet. After I finished the project, Becca invited me to a party to show off my work. I went mostly for business reasons. After all, most of their friends were pretty well off. I made a few acquaintances and ended up sitting with Becca while the party ended. I still talk to her from time to time, she said abruptly. I realized she was talking about Cindy. I hadn't thought of her in years. Without asking me, she pulled out some pictures on her phone. Cindy had cut her hair much shorter than she had in college and had gained probably 30 pounds. It didn't look too bad on her tall figure, but the tone I remembered was long gone. In one of the pictures, she was standing next to a man who was a couple inches shorter. They had their arms around each other and were smiling at the camera. Her second husband, Becca said. The first one was a complete failure because they both had affairs. She met David a year later when he brought a client to her. They ended up having coffee, then had a date that led to the altar. She too was in therapy and told him the truth about you, her first husband, and how she didn't think she was a good wife. After a long engagement, he convinced her that he was willing to take the risk, to trust her because he had no choice. He just couldn't imagine life without her. They eloped the next day. It's been just under 2 years and they are inseparable. I believe she'll make it work this time. I think I surprised her when I told her I was happy for her. I thought about it later and decided that I really was happy for her. Apparently it had taken her years to get herself in shape, and I hoped it was worth the wait. As for me, I stopped going on dates, trying to figure myself out. I couldn't afford to get involved with anyone when Melody's ghost still loomed before my eyes. On a whim, I sent her an email. Mel, I just want you to know that I wasn't trying to make some kind of statement when I saw you at the club. I had no intention of hurting you or making you feel uncomfortable. It was pure accident. I had no idea you were there. If it's any consolation, it ruined my evening too. Jess, she replied to me the next day. I'm sorry I ruined your evening. I had no right to. I know it's over between us. I know we'll never be together. I just can't stop loving you. I've given up trying. Time is supposed to heal you, but all it does is make me miss you even more. I got an offer from another hospital far enough away that I won't run into you. I think I'll take the job and start fresh. Maybe then I'll be cured. I really do wish you happiness. Mel. P.S. If you ever want to talk, just text. I wondered. We didn't see each other that often, but if moving would help her, I'd be all for it. Maybe then one of us would be happy. And here we were, swaying to the music. The feeling was disturbingly familiar and yet completely different. Jerry bribed the orchestra and they played 3 slow songs in a row. I would have stopped after the first one, but she wouldn't let me go. I thought about forcing her, but I didn't. When they finally ended, she clutched at my arm. Will you sit with me for a while? Please. I'll get on my knees and beg if I have to. The thought of her embarrassing us both made me agree. She led me to a small table at the back of the room, far enough away from the group that we could talk. She tried to make small talk and I let her ramble for a minute before I stopped her. What are you really trying to say, Mel? Stop beating around the bush and get it out in the open. She hung her head for a second and then looked up at me. I'd never seen a more determined expression on her face. I can answer that in one word. You. I want you back. I've tried, Jess, really, really tried, but I can't let you go. I can't forget about you. I can't stop loving you. I can see it in your eyes. You still care about me. I know you don't date. My friends tell me that every time they see me. Why? You have it all. Good looks, good values, great job, bright future. I bet you've been hit on a lot since we broke up. You could have had your pick, but you blew them all off. I think I know why. I can tell you why I didn't find anyone else. First of all, I didn't want anyone else. I thought about dating a couple times, but I looked at them, wondered how they'd compare to you, and told them no. I never stopped loving you. I never even pretended to try. Why don't we start over? I think you'll find me very different than I was before. I'm begging you, just give me one chance. Take me out on one date, and if I feel like it's wrong, I'll never bother you again. Think about it and call me. My number's still the same. Thank you for listening, and thank you for the dance. It means a lot to me. She jumped up and kissed me on the cheek, then left. I watched as she talked to Jerry and Anna, hugged both of them, and then disappeared out the door. Jerry came over and sat down. Well? Well, what? Don't act like an idiot. Are you going to give her another chance? You have to. You deserve it. I looked at him like he'd just turned green and spoke a foreign language. He only sighed. That's up to you. Another thing I wanted to tell you earlier. Since the day she met you, she hasn't had anything else with me. She apologized for that in her letter. She said she had contracted something at work and that it would be 6 months before she could do it again, and she had to get tested to make sure she was free of the disease. I should have been angry about that, but by the time she told me, I had forgotten about it. I guess deep down I never loved her either. Not the way I should have loved her. Now go ahead and congratulate us one more time before we leave. Niagara Falls, can you believe it? I wanted somewhere warm and she wanted it. I have a feeling that whatever Anna wants, she'll get. She wanted me and she got me. She's the one who insisted I bring you both here. She can be very persuasive. I like that. I thought about it for about 2 weeks. A neighboring town had Friday night concerts in the summer on the lawn of the old courthouse. Blues folk, rock and country to lighten things up. That weekend, a blues duo, a man and a woman with the catchy name Freeman Feelbad Jr. and Sweet Thang were performing. I had heard them before and they were very good. I called Mel and asked if she wanted to attend. There was a long silence. I thought she had hung up. Then I heard a quiet yes that sounded like a sob, and she left. It seemed like a safe choice. Surrounded by a lot of people, there was no chance of getting in too deep somewhere. I didn't even bother picking her up. We met at the playground. I got there early and picked a good spot, setting up chairs in advance. She showed up right on time at the place where we agreed to meet. She didn't notice me at first, and I stared at her for a while. She was wearing a pale yellow sundress, her long curls glistening against the setting sun. The sight took my breath away. Her smile blossomed when she saw me. She rushed toward me, about to hug me, but stopped. Instead, she shyly touched my hand. We walked around the square until the show started, window shopping and people watching. I bought 2 glasses of red wine, which I knew she liked, to sip while we listened. The duo was very good, professional. The guy was older, in his early 40s, and she looked to be a little over 30. Their voices blended very well, and he was a slide virtuoso. Their shorthand between songs was humorous, and their song selection had something for everyone. We laughed at the humorous ones, but when the guy sang a song about a woman cheating on him, you could hear the anguish in his voice. Mel tensed up and looked at me, blushing. The next song, a duet about rekindling romance, brought a smile to her face. By 9, the concert was over. She stood while I cleaned up the chairs and looked at me longingly. "Thank you for tonight, Jess. It's not over yet. Unless you want it to end. I'm starving. Do you want to eat pizza at Yanni's?" Tears glistened as she took my hand. It was one of our favorite restaurants when we were together. Yanni's was located on the square and offered Greek and Italian cuisine. On concert nights, they stayed open for another hour and did a pretty good business. I did the stonework in his outdoor dining area. Yanni personally served us without even letting us order. "Ah, young lovers. I'm afraid you've forgotten your old friend. It's good to see you again. 1 pizza from Yanni's right away." A large pizza, half of which was filled with anchovies, mine, and the other half with mushrooms, hers. We ate and put the leftovers in a box. I walked her to her car. "Thanks for the evening, Mel." I had fun. She had been holding my hand since we left the restaurant. Before I could say anything else, she hugged me tightly, kissed me on the cheek, and jumped into the car. I stood and watched her taillights disappear and wondered what it all meant. We went out 2 more times. A silly romantic movie that gave her an excuse to take my hand and snuggle up to me while she sniffled. Then a day at the local fair. She made me walk with her through all the exhibits, admiring the canned goods and pastries, laughing at the exotic vegetables. She froze in front of a huge display of quilts, a dozen or more, from traditional to modern, all works of fabric art. Tears came to my eyes again, and a memory came over me. One evening, as we were getting cozy in my new home, she showed me a picture of a quilt in one of her magazines. I've always wanted to learn how to do that. Why? Because silly me, I want to be able to sew all the children their own personal quilt, something durable that they can pass on to their children and those children to our great-grandchildren. She realized what she'd said and looked at me nervously. I grinned. "How many blankets are we talking about?" She smiled, glad I wasn't angry. "Oh, at least 3. Maybe more if you're lucky." She laughed at the stunned expression on my face and settled back down again, flipping through the pages. Back to the present, I said nothing, but took her hand and squeezed it gently, grabbing the card in front of the display and putting it in my pocket. "Busy Needle Quilting Club. Join us and learn the art of quilt making. We have classes, workshops, and soon you'll be sewing with confidence. Plus, she has a birthday coming up. I thought this would be the perfect gift. The candy will be eaten, the flowers will fade, but the new skill will stay with you forever." We went on rides, at least the ones she could get me on. I watched her ride the scarier ones myself. Come on, everyone's scared of something, right? She thought it was funny that a battle-hardened veteran was afraid of little old roller coasters. She had her own fears, chief among them being thunderstorms. When she was 6 years old, she was almost struck by lightning. It had struck the ground 10 feet away, knocking her and her friends unconscious. Now she stayed inside, away from the windows, and shook until it was over. Holding her in my arms helped a little. We kissed for the first time, sitting and watching the fireworks that we set off every night while the fair was going on, huddled together in the bleachers of the arena. It just happened. None of us planned it. She said something, and when I turned to respond, our lips seemed to lock of their own accord. It seemed like it lasted for hours, but it was probably only 10 or 15 seconds. We pulled apart and looked at each other, amazement written all over both of our faces. We didn't say a word to each other for the rest of the evening, and when I drove her home, she just walked out and into the house. We hadn't seen each other for almost 3 weeks. We weren't avoiding each other. I was still trying to catch up on work. The weather had caused us to fall behind again, and it took us that long to catch up. We talked on the phone a few times, but she seemed distant. I began to wonder if the kiss was a mistake. I called home and informed my family that I had finished the project and intended to be home by Thursday. They seemed relieved but worried that I was working too much and it was wearing me out. I sighed and tossed the bag of dirty laundry into the foyer. I'll wash them later. I wanted to shower first and in the most horrible way possible. The only change I've made since I bought the apartment was remodeling the bathroom. It was bigger and the shower had enough room for 4 people. It had 6 nozzles that could be turned on simultaneously, individually, or in any combination of your choice. Full flow, massage pulses, or gentle mist. When I had it made, my first thought was how much Mel would like it. It wasn't finished until 2 weeks after we broke up. When you live alone, especially if you've lived alone for a while, you don't usually think about how you're dressed when you go out. I thought I heard a giggle. It was Mel sitting on the bed. What? How? Why? A smile spread across her face. What? Is that your mom told me you'd be home tonight? How? You didn't make me hand over the keys, and why? Because I have something to tell you. Now get dressed and meet me in the living room. She staggered out of the bedroom, felt me watching her, looked over her shoulder and grinned. Here's another thought. You stay as you are and I'll join you. The thought made me jump to my feet. No, I hissed. I'll be out in a second. I grabbed my shorts and t-shirt, wanting to relax. It took a few minutes. When I came out, she was sitting in the rocking chair looking out into the backyard. Turning to me, she gave me her beautiful smile. I have something to tell you, and I want you not to interrupt. I want to tell you everything before my nerves give out. Please? I nodded, sinking down onto the sectional couch she'd insisted on putting up. I'd thought about changing the furniture when we separated, but it fit the room well, and it was comfortable. I preferred to sit in the chair most of the time. Every time I sat down on the couch, images of us cuddling or making love would run through my head, and eventually I would move. I know that the last few times we've talked, I've been out of sorts. It reminded me of what I've lost, of what I want back. I want you back. I want you to chase me around the house like you used to until I get tired of playing and let you catch me. I want to take the air mattress out to the backyard, lie on it like we used to, look up at the stars, snuggling against each other, and then make love. I want you to love me again. She paused, gathering her thoughts. I started to speak, but she held up her hand. Wait, I'm almost done. And then I realized something. You already love me. I know it, you know it, everyone we know knows it. Love isn't our problem. It's trust. I lied to you in the worst possible way. It took some time, but now I realize how much I hurt you. So I had to find a way to regain your trust. Here's what I came up with. Let me move back in. You've got security cameras, add them. Wire up the whole house. Then, while you're gone, you can access the footage at any time to see what I'm up to. Put a GPS tracker on my car, and you'll know immediately where I am and where I've been. I did a little research on the internet. We can buy a personal tracker, like those ankle thingies that criminals wear. This model is a bracelet. Again, you'll immediately see where I am at all times. She lowered her eyes, a deep blush appearing on her face. If that's not enough, I'll wear a chastity belt. They make them, I've checked. You can lock me up when you leave and release me when you come home. I'll do all this just to prove you can trust me. Wow. Obviously, Mel had thought this through carefully. Unfortunately, she missed one thing. I explained it to her as gently as possible. First, let me thank you for thinking about how we can be together again. For being willing to do all the things you described. But it's never going to work. Tears came to my eyes, and I held up my hand as she tried to speak. It's my turn. Hear me out. All the things you're willing to do are things you don't need to do. If we did them, you wouldn't be a partner in a relationship, but a slave. While some of them sound fun in terms of play, you can't live with that all the time. Oh, I'm sure you'd try, but sooner or later you'd start to resent it. I know I would. All this stuff doesn't foster trust, just the opposite. If I have to put so much effort into it, it only reinforces the idea that you can't be trusted. I can't live like this. Deep down, you know all of this. The tears flowed freely. She stood up and crept toward the door. I caught her and pulled her to me on the couch. She buried her head in my shoulder and cried for a few minutes. So it's over then? Quite the opposite, baby. I think it's just beginning. What you did today, what you were willing to do, takes a lot of courage. That's what makes me think we can make it work. So let's take our time, build on what we've done. Okay? She looked up and smiled. She reminded me of the sun peeking out after a big thunderstorm. Really? Yes, honey, really. The next morning I was going to take her to breakfast and then to her apartment to get clothes. She was working double shifts today to help a friend. Then she was going back to the house for the weekend. I met her roommates and understood why she said she was thinking about moving. Amanda was a tall blonde. Decent looking, but she couldn't compare to Melody. She'd been married twice, divorced twice, and both times the reason was infidelity. Her last time was with a woman, and she had a bit of a crush on Mello. Beth was red-haired and attractive if she ever smiled. She hadn't cheated on her husband, but she had anger issues. He'd postponed the wedding until she got help, and she'd lied to him, saying she'd gone through an anger management program. After the wedding, she turned into what her ex described as a screaming bitch that the devil must have kicked out of hell because even he couldn't stand her. He'd gone down the path of irreconcilable differences because it was the easiest way, and in this case, it was the right way. She was surprised, though he had begged her to seek help right up to the day he filed the papers. She didn't take it well, and ended up getting a restraining order requiring her to stay 500 feet away from him at all times. She went through it twice before the judge got fed up with it and put her in jail for the weekend. She begged for counseling, got it, but after 3 sessions of listening to her scream, the counselor recommended divorce. It was sad, and he promised that he would stop the divorce if she sought help. Of course, she didn't. Her idea of revenge was to screw anything that moved and tell him about it. By then, he didn't care anymore because he had met someone else. The funny thing is, she's in therapy now because the hospital told her it was either that or unemployment. No one wants a nurse with a patient attitude like hers. They didn't hesitate for a second. As soon as Mel closed the door, they pounced on me like rabid hyenas. So you're the guy who messed with her head like that. I know you're kind, you can't or won't forgive. Your precious pride won't let you. You'll end up making her jump through hoops until you're sick of her and you'll dump her again. Asshole. I know my mouth was open. I'd never seen anyone spew venom like that. She must have had a day where she could spew it out at someone. I made a mental note to never turn my back on Beth. Amanda wasn't any better. If you hurt her, I swear to God, it'll be the last thing you do. She deserves better. She deserves to find someone who can love her right, not some asshole who will lord it over her for the rest of her life because she made a mistake. She probably would have said more, but I'd already heard enough. My good mood had long since faded. Listen up, bitches. First of all, this has nothing to do with Mel and me. And if you think you're going to be the one to end up with her, think again. Mel's trying to be tolerant. But the fact that you'll manage to sleep with her is about the same as the fact that I'll ever like you. It's not going to happen in this life. I turned to Beth. And you. Amanda, I can understand a little. She's in love, or maybe just deeply lustful. You have no excuses. You just don't want anyone to be happy, period. Your husband should be a saint for putting up with your shit for as long as he did. I was on a roll. In retrospect, I can say that maybe I should have been a little quieter, but it felt good to let my emotions out, especially on bitches you didn't care deeply about. So screw you both. I'm not the least bit interested in your luggage. Right now, we need to deal with our own past. Don't expect an invitation if we decide to get married. You'd better come, of course, but seeing your face when I say my vows will be just fine. Mel caught the last moment of our exchange and stared at it like a deer caught in the headlights. Amanda noticed her and immediately stared at her. I hope you were listening, Mel. This guy isn't going to bring you back. He's just messing with you, waiting for you to get comfortable before he puts the hammer to work. I've met guys like that before, honey. Notice he says if a lot. My second husband was just like him. Just too damn proud to forgive a mistake. Newsflash, asshole, pride won't love you back, give you kisses, hug you when you feel bad. At this point, I was beyond furious. Really, Amanda, really. Pride won't let you do those things. But pride will allow you to look yourself in the morning, confident that you are true to your beliefs. Pride will also allow you to walk down the street and look other people in the eye for the same reason. I have often thought that the old saying about pride is wrong. Pride doesn't precede a fall, it comes after it. When you find yourself in the mud and everything you wanted, everything you believed in, and everything you loved has been taken from you, pride will lift you up. Pride will force you to live up to your principles. It may not allow you to sleep at night, but it will make you realize that your insomnia is tolerable. Now, however interesting this conversation may be, Mel is ready and we are going. I took her hand and pulled her out the door, never so excited to leave a place in my life. On the way to the car, Mel was silent. When we got home, she put the suitcase in the trunk instead of carrying it. I was confused. Mel, honey, let's put your suitcase in the house. You don't have to drive around town with it. There's a chance of it being stolen. It'll be here when you get here tonight. She didn't look me in the eye. I think I'll pass. I'll be really tired, so I'll probably just go home and crash in bed. I need to think without distractions. That hit me hard. What's wrong, Mel? 3 hours ago, you were whining about volunteering for a job and regretting it. You even tried to ask someone to cover for you. And now, because of the rantings of some seriously horny women, and even after yesterday and this morning, you don't want to spend time with me? Fine. Go find someone else. But be careful. I've already learned to live without you once. If you start being passive and aggressive with me now, it'll be the last straw. And before you go, I'd like my key back. I think she realized then that she had made a serious mistake and tried to correct it, but I was nowhere near as reasonable. To hell with all that. After we're finally reunited, does she want to come back? She was done. I'm done with her. I'm perfectly fine without her. Of course you're not. I missed her more than I had before we broke up the first time, and I was angry at myself for letting myself believe it. I was comforted by my work. You have to be careful when you're working with big rocks. That's what my broken fingers had taught me. So I worked on the backlog, trying to catch up on my work until the cold weather got in our way. I didn't go home for 3 weeks and only took 1 day off to do laundry and check on the house. I was a little surprised to see her car in my driveway. I was even more surprised when Mel flew out of the house and pounced on me, knocking us both to the ground. She clutched at me with a death grip, mumbling and muttering almost incoherently. She was pretty strong, but she didn't lift rocks for a living. I got tired of being gentle, so I took her hands and forced them back until they were behind her back. Shut up! I had never raised my voice at her before, and it shocked her, silencing her. I took advantage of this and stood up, leaving her on the ground. I left her lying on the ground, whimpering like a wounded animal, determined to leave her there. I was about to close the door when her whimpering turned into a scream. Even though I wanted nothing to do with her, I couldn't stand the sound of her pain. I went back and tried to pick her up, but she refused to move. Then I took her in my arms and headed for the door. Her arms wrapped around my neck as the tears flowed and she nuzzled into my neck. I lowered her to the couch, not very gently, and went to get some water. Drink, I said, sitting her upright. She drank the water and stared at me with her huge eyes. How did you get here? I asked when she fell silent. She started to speak, but incoherently. I raised my hand and she stopped instantly. I'll try again. Answer me in simple words. Take your time, and be truthful. One lie and I'll never speak to you again. Begin. She lowered her head as she spoke, so quietly that I almost asked her to speak louder. I broke the window. I replaced it right away. I knew where you kept the spare keys and I used them. That night I came home after I finished my shift, had a terrible fight with Amanda and Beth, and they kicked me out. I could have gone to a motel, but I ran here like a wounded animal. Because I was a wounded animal, destroyed by my own actions. I just wanted to be near you, to beg you to help me get your love back. You weren't here, and you didn't respond to the texts, messages, and emails I left for you. I felt safe here, so I stayed, waiting for you to come home. If you want me to leave, I'll leave. She looked utterly destroyed. Kicking her out would be like beating a puppy. Well, not right now. I still have some things to think about, and for that I'm going to need your help. Order a pizza, I'm starving. I'll be back after my shower. Her eyes lit up with hope, but my gaze dimmed it a bit. When I stepped out of the shower, dressed in sweatpants, I noticed she was fresher, minimal makeup, hair neatly tied back in a ponytail. She looked younger that way. I was saved from talking by the appearance of the pizza, which Mel grabbed and dragged into the kitchen. By the time I paid, she'd already set the table, and there was a glass of wine next to the plate. I handed the wine back. Water will suffice for now. I want to have a clear head for later. She nodded, poured us both a glass each, and left the wine. I paid attention to the way she ate, taking bites and glancing at me from time to time. She seemed a little slimmer than I remembered. Are you on a diet? She shook her head. Just haven't felt like eating lately. I nodded and ate another slice of pizza, pondering as I ate. I really didn't know what to do. We were a pretty messed up pair of human beings. We finished, she cleaned up a bit, and we sat down in the living room to talk. I noticed that she was disappointed that I didn't sit next to her, but chose to position myself facing her in the chair. Tell me the truth, Mel. I know you want us to be together again. I want us to be together again. But how? How can I trust you? What can you say or do to get us back to where we were before everything fell apart? Suggestions? She actually had a plan. Couples counseling. Pam at work told me about it. She went through a bad time with her boyfriend just before they were going to get married, and they went there to see if they could save their love. She said it worked wonders, making them both realize that they weren't ready for married life. They postponed their wedding for a year, but she said the wait was worth it, because when she walked down the aisle and met him at the altar, they were both sure in their hearts that this was the path they were meant to walk. I even get a discount because of my work. Would you consider it? I think it's the only way to overcome what I've done. I want to try and I'm begging you. There's a chance we'll realize we'll never be together, but I'm willing to accept it. This half-life is killing me. Please promise me you'll think about it. I could tell it took a lot for her to make that little speech, and I promised I'd think about it. She nodded, looking half hopeful. She stood up, and I heard her rummaging around in the bedroom. A few minutes later, she came out, dragging her suitcase behind her. Will you help me load it into the car? Well, the hell with it. She sits in my house, begs me to go to couples counseling with her, and then runs off again? Where are you going? Mel looked surprised. To a motel, I guess. I know you don't want me here right now. I think I'll look for an apartment next week. I picked up the suitcase, surprised at its weight. Instead of heading for the door, I carried it into the bedroom, tossed it on the bed, and started unpacking. She followed me and watched in silence before asking in a timid voice what I was doing. I'm putting your clothes in their places. Now, do you want to help me? I can do without you if I need to, but I can't put things where you want them. I picked up one of her thongs and twirled it in my hands. Suddenly shy, she snatched it from me. Here's the deal, she said through tears. I'll clean them and put them on, but you have to take them off as often as possible. I had never seen a woman cry and smile at the same time. Her face contorted with all sorts of expressions. Agreed, I said softly, but there will be some rules. I think I'll have some wine. Would you like your glass? She nodded, her hair falling over her eyes. 10 minutes later, she pressed herself against me and took the wine. Mel was silent for a few minutes, savoring the wine and the moment. Finally, in a voice so quiet I almost didn't hear it, she whispered. Rules? Yes, Mel, the rules. I'd like to say we'll make it work, but until we solve our problems, I'm not sure. You'll continue to live with me. You can sleep in my bed if you want. We won't get better if we're apart. Make an appointment for counseling as soon as possible. Email me the dates, but please try to schedule it for Friday evening so I can work. I'm willing to try, Mel. You know I love you more than anything in the world, but I need to know in my heart that I can trust you completely in the future. And if for some reason one of us decides it's not going to work out, we'll tell the other one right away. Agreed. I expected her to lash out at me, but she said nothing, sipping her wine. I was about to speak again when Mel spoke up. Yes, from the bottom of my heart. And I'm going to sleep in our bed. Where else would I sleep? In return, I want a few things from you. I want you to loosen up your work enough to spend more than one day with me. I want your absolute promise that unless there is a natural disaster or cataclysmic event, you will attend all sessions. Promise me. I was about to reply when she raised her hand. And one more thing. I want you to try to think of a way I can prove how much I love you and that I will always be faithful to you. Whatever it is, I will do it. But I have my doubts. Maybe sometime in the future I'll ask you to do the same. Deal? Deal, I said. We didn't make love that night. It just felt wrong somehow. I lay awake, pondering, wondering if we were finally on the right path to happiness. I justified my words. On Fridays, I worked half days or no work at all so I could be home during my sessions. The counselor was a man, which surprised me. I would have bet good money that she would choose a woman. As it turned out, she chose him because he had the highest success rate in helping couples work through their problems than anyone else in his practice. I liked this guy. He was calm, relaxed, and told me he liked to keep the drama to a minimum. We had one session each before going together. At each one, he asked what outcome we were hoping for. Our answers were very similar. He was calm but didn't procrastinate, and often Mel would cry before the session was over. I didn't cry, but he pushed my buttons skillfully enough to make me want to punch him a couple times. He got Mel to admit what I suspected. She stayed with Jerry, especially early in our relationship, as a security blanket in case I turned out not to be who I thought I was. When she realized she wanted me, she started the divorce process but didn't file for it. She reasoned that until I proposed to her, she wasn't sure how I felt. I said that was nonsense, and the counselor agreed with me. Is that really true, Melanie? In the 6 months that you were dating, especially after you started staying with him on weekends, you didn't feel sure that he loved you? Even if you denied your ex sex while you were dating Jesse, you still shared a bed, still cuddled, exchanged caresses. And when he left, you did the same thing with Jesse. Yes, you divorced, but only after you were caught. She almost shouted out her answer, surprising us both. You think I don't know what I did? I betrayed them both, and I ruined every chance at happiness I ever had. She calmed down a little and snorted. I don't think that's necessarily true, Melanie, or you two wouldn't be here right now. However, I do think we've gone as far as we can in these sessions. We both looked at him in surprise. But we're not healed yet, exclaimed Melanie. No, we're not healed. But you've gone as far as you could with my help. You're both obviously still deeply in love with each other. That was easy to determine. You want to stay together, to find the happiness you both desperately desire. That goes without saying. It all comes down to trust. Can Jesse trust you? I hope so. Does he trust you now? No. It's the same with you. You're not sure he can survive what you did, and that at some point he might want revenge. You both need to make a decision soon about whether the work and pain you're both going through is worth it to resolve your issues. I can't do that. I don't have a magic wand to wave over you and declare you are cured. I can only wish you luck and say this. I think if you can find the grace of each other, you will never regret it. And if you can't, well, you need to suffer the loss and walk away. I wish you all the luck in the world. We ended up outside his office and looked at each other in surprise. Melanie said, "What do we do next?" I didn't have an answer. We tried to move forward for 3 months. We would have days of happiness, and then something would trigger in one of us, and life would get stressful for a day or so. We would quickly become frustrated and cracks would appear. I thought about her often while I was at work. She would call me every night, which I looked forward to, and then send pictures of her at our house, proving she was there. It got tiresome quickly. "Enough," I said to her one night. "Stop sending me pictures, and stop locking yourself in the house every night. It's driving us both crazy. Get out of the house once in a while, have dinner with friends, even go out for drinks with people you work with. I will assume that you are an adult who has made a mistake and learned from it. If I don't, it won't matter anymore, will it?" I think she got the point. A few days later, she went to the movies with her best friend. She liked horror movies, which I had absolutely no interest in, and she called me the next night to tell me how much fun she'd had before moving on to a serious relationship. Thank you, sweetheart, for loving me and for trusting me. Gasping, she stopped. It felt good, I even teased her, telling her I was glad I didn't have to drag myself to lame movies anymore. Her former spirit showed through. They don't suck. They're an art form that a caveman like you just doesn't understand. Despite your feeble intellect, I still love you. Good night, sweetheart. But no matter how hard I tried, she knew something was holding me back. In the last week or so, she had become quiet, and I realized that this could be the beginning of the end. Oddly enough, things worked out just fine at the flea market. Mel loved the smell of incense. She had little burners all over the house. Most of the smells were pleasant enough, so I tolerated it. There was a booth run by a woman who looked like a poor man's version of the voodoo queen that had literally hundreds of scents. Mel was running low and asked me to take her along. We both loved it and often spent hours at a time in the store. We actually bought very little, but every once in a while we stumbled upon a treasure, at least in our opinion. I watched her flutter back and forth, willowy grace personified, smiling, occasionally raising her wand to her nose. She sensed I was watching her, lifted her head and smiled, the familiar, joyful smile I loved so much. Then her eyes clouded over, and she lowered her gaze in sadness. At that very moment, I realized that if I didn't change, I would soon lose her. It was late summer, and as we were leaving, one of those quick seasonal thunderstorms broke, with wind and lightning passing as quickly as it came. There was the first rumble of thunder, and Mel jumped slightly. I instinctively put my arm around her, calming her down. Luckily, we were inside, in one of the many halls that seemed to stretch on endlessly. We got there late, and they were already starting to close. "Wait here, honey. I'll get the truck and drive up to the door." I jogged into the parking lot and was soaked almost instantly. I thought intensely as I waited for my turn to pull up to the door, almost praying to overcome my blockage and love her the way I was supposed to. As I pulled up to the house, a song I'd always loved came on the radio station I'd been half listening to. "Slow dancing, swaying to the music, slow dancing, just me and my girl," came from the speakers. I looked toward the entrance, trying to get a glimpse of Mel, and glanced at the bumper sticker of a small van parked nearby, guessing it belonged to an incense salesman. There were many stickers on the van, but the one that caught my eye sent shivers running down my spine. Life isn't about hiding from the storm, it's about learning to love dancing in the rain, I realized. Way to prove to me that Mel loved me. I opened the door and turned up the volume. I stood in the pouring rain while lightning flashed and held out my hand. "I get it, sweetheart. If you really love me, I mean really, really love me, you'll come outside and dance with me. This is our last chance, please, please, let's dance." I was almost shouting to be heard. Everyone was looking at her, wondering what she would do. I know she couldn't see them in the rain, but tears were running down my cheeks. She crept to the door, flinching with every flash, and I stood holding my hand 3 feet away from her. Mel looked into my eyes, trying to see if I was sincere. She must have gotten the answer she wanted. The song ended after about 90 seconds, and I picked her up in my arms and put her in the truck. Yes, the song was short, but it said everything that needed to be said. She loved me enough to come face to face with her greatest fear to prove it. What better demonstration could there be? We sat in the parking lot, wiping each other with dashboard wipes, laughing and crying together. Then we drove home and made love. and it was total absolute love. 9 months later, I felt weak looking at it. The newest, steepest, scariest roller coaster on the planet. There were loops and turns and a sheer drop from a height of 325 feet. But I had to do it, so I held her hand tightly as we stood at the ready to be buckled in. A week after the slow dance in the rain, she told me that one day she would ask me to do something in return to show my absolute love for her. I instantly agreed, and this is the result. The coaster was designed like a bullet, and the seat was single lane. She let me go first, holding my hand while I was strapped in and secured. Then I felt horror as she let go of me and stepped back. "You're not coming with me?" For some reason, she smirked and cried at the same time. "I can't." "Why the hell not?" I almost screamed as the ride ripped forward and picked up speed. Rule number 3. I read the rules as I rode past them. Rule 1. You must be 48 inches tall to ride this ride. Rule 2. Anyone with heart or other medical conditions should not ride this ride. Rule 3. Pregnant women are not allowed on this ride. Wait a minute. What? Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, so subscribe to my channel and watch the next video.